37 days into the ongoing face-off between the National Association of Resident Doctors and the federal government over their demands, an agreed memorandum of action which was signed by both parties, but somehow reneged upon by one of the parties, and NARD has gone on strike to try and force the federal government's hand to implement that, and that's why we're counting 37 days now since they have gone on strike. However, that track which you saw there was the Minister of Labor, talking about what the federal government is willing to give. That happened over the weekend, I think on Sunday or thereabouts, when he was saying that if the doctors do come back to work, they will withdraw the case they have in court against them. The question is, will NARD, that's the National Association of Resident Doctors, will they accept that offer? We have with us in the studio this morning Dr. Uyilawa Okwayesuyi, who is the President, Nigerian Association of Resident Doctors. You're welcome to our studios this morning.
Thank you, Mark. And thank you for pronouncing my names very well.
Well, it comes with practice, doesn't it? You've been a lot in the news these days, and it looks like it's taking a toll on you somewhat. I'm wondering, when would you say the grounds will begin to shift? Because the stance of NARD is that we went on strike to force you to implement your own parts of the agreement, but the federal government is saying that when you do go on strike, there are consequences. I mean, the no work, no pay rule should apply. However, they say, much as we've taken this matter to court, we're willing to withdraw it if you come back to work. What are you willing to give?
Thank you very much. And apologies to Nigerians for towing this line again. We went on strike on the 2nd of April and started under 1 on the 2nd of August. It has been seasons of recurrent strike, basically because one group or one set have refused to honor agreements made. It's quite sad when, after a memorandum of actions signed over 151 days ago, 31st of March, 9th of April, and we are back to the stage again. I'll start with analyzing everything. We lost 19, we lost 2 more now, meaning we have lost 21 breadwinners.
21 who? Doctors?
21 resident doctors.
Owing to what?
To COVID-19. And we have a system that tells you all health workers have been insured. Death in service insurance or compensations for the next of kin is more like a mirage now. The head of service then, at the instance of the Speaker of the House and the Honorable Minister of Labor, said the country have brought about 995 million to help insure all health workers. And up to now, 2 additions to the 19, no death in service insurance to any of our members. Or members on the Gift Mix platform.
Dr. Kwesi, yes, much as we really want to know, I'm sure that a lot of Nigerians over the period of the strike, because you have made a lot of media appearances to state the grievances that you have against the federal government, to say these were the agreements, these were the grievances we had against them in the first instance, these were the agreements that we reached. We not only reached an agreement, but we also signed a memorandum of action. A lot of Nigerians, I want to believe, are well aware of that particular stage and a lot of the things that were in that memorandum of action. However, the federal government has said, yes, I don't know if they have accepted that they were the ones who reneged or they're the ones who haven't moved. They say, oh, we have been working behind the scenes, but that the system is very slow. Bureaucracy has been, you know, how will I put it now, tying their hands. And they have also given their own explanation as well. We have been made to understand that if a doctor, for instance, were to resign today, it would take him only a month. However, to replace that same doctor would take nothing less than 6 months, for instance. And this is all owing to bureaucracy, the fact that waivers have to be secured, etc., etc. The question is, knowing all of that and tabling it, because I'm sure you have been having meetings with the federal government, and this is what they're now offering. What will be the minimum requirement for NARD? Because I'm not sure that you're happy that you're on the strike. I'm sure that you want to be able to give your service to Nigerians. What will be the minimum requirement for the NARD to say, look, we will not only come back to the negotiating table, we'll be willing to go back to work if you meet this minimum condition?
Thank you very much. First, minimum requirements. We want all members on gift mix to be paid. They are owing 5 months to 7 months salaries up to now, and nothing is done about it. The 114 house officers are still not being paid. The medical resident training fund is still not being addressed. We signed a document over 151 days ago.
So you want 114 officers who are being owed
they should
to
be
paid.
The members on giving should be paid. Now, the Nigerian Association of Resident Doctors are saying the season for a change in the medical sector is now. We do not want to negotiate with Minister of Labour and Minister of Health. We actually think that for Nigeria to have a better health sector, those people also have to be changed. We are adamant and we insist on this. You cannot go to the presidency and be feeding wrong informations and come on TV and said the 12 things they have done have been met when you are signing another MOU after 151 days. The people that have not been paid, have you asked them how they have fed their families? Have you asked them that school is resuming now in September, how they are going to go back to schools for those children? Have you asked them how they are able to pay their rents? Somebody is not doing their job and they are sitting down in their tables. They are enjoying COVID allowance that was paid to them. They have enjoyed all salaries and not on DTAs for extra time being spent when negotiating with us. And we are bearing the brunt, and Nigerians are suffering. There's a season for everything. If the health system have to move forward, there need to be an overhaul of the entire system.
And I think that to a large extent, there is nobody who will not agree with you. You have seen the support. We've heard the NMA, even threaten a strike action on behalf of NARD. We've seen MD Khan, the Medical and Dental Consultants Association of Nigeria, also threaten an action, even though they said it was also to correct a few things. And we could see that immediately the federal government, moved to action. And they have also spoken up in support of NARD. So it would seem that within the medical sector, the people who should have your back have your back. Even sister unions, Johesu, we understand, has also been speaking up on behalf of the health sector. So nobody can begrudge the fact that what you're asking for is not your right. It is. However, when we look at how long drawn this is becoming, and also the number of lives that we're going to be losing as a result of this, and also the fact that, we have cholera outbreak in many states, we have COVID-19 now back in full force, it would seem. Sadly, you've lost 2 additional members of your group to this deadly disease. I'm just wondering, apart from this, assuming today the federal government were to pay the 114
house officers,
would you call off the strike?
We had an intervention by the Vice President Ushabanjo on Friday, where we spoke for over 1 hour 45 minutes. In what the National Health Service Committee have realized is that the biggest problem we have is from the Minister of Labour. I can tell you that if I go back to my members and they ask for just one person, and we'll call off the strike, we'll ask for the Minister of Labour to be removed, and we'll call off the strike. Not concerning the no work, no pay, or any other thing he has done, for feeding Nigerians and the presidency lies. He comes on air regularly, misinforming Nigerians when people are dying, and tells you he's a medical elder. I wonder in years to come what legacies we have left behind. I'll give you examples, please.
This is very personal.
It's not personal now.
No, to the Minister of Health. I mean, the Minister of Labour.
I'll tell you what, Ma, is the chief reconciliator of the federal government. What has he reconciled? ASU is threatening to go on strike. JUSU is threatening to go on strike. MDCAN is threatening to go on strike. Enemy is threatening to go on strike. Virtually all sectors in Nigeria wants to go on strike. How many reconciliation has he done and gained to make people go back and do the right things?
You say that the Minister of Labour has been feeding the government lies. I mean, those are your words. Do you have evidence to show that indeed it was he who was actually giving the government, assuming there were some presumptions that were not correct on the part of government, that it was from him that those presumptions emanated?
Memories never lie. On channels here, he said the presidency was told that we have met 12 of virtually all their demands. I think we need to chronicle it down. The debt in service insurance is still not met after 151 days. The members on Gift Mix platform are still owed 5 to 7 months. It has not been met. The capturing of the members of Gift Mix and those locum officers that have been casualized by the chief medical directors has still not been met. The medical resident training fund, as of 3 weeks ago, was promised to have been paid, to be paid. It's still not been paid. The minimum wage adjustment allowance is still not paid. The shortfalls of 2014, 15, 16 have still not been met. And you come on air and tell them that you have virtually met everything done, and because of that you are applying no work, no pay. What have been applied to those that have not done their jobs? It's sad and disheartening when we lose people to cholera, to COVID-19, to Ebola. And you think you are doing Nigerians a favor, that you want to apply no work, no pay. You think that will scare us?
Well, it's obviously, you know, the directive, it would seem, is obviously making doctors even more angry. But what I would like to know right now, because last week we also saw, this is at the federal government's level. The federal government also claims that a lot of the things which NARD demands is at the level of the states. And last week we saw a meeting, the SGF, the Secretary of the Government of the Federation, summoning a meeting of the commissioners of health in the different states to Abuja here. I don't know if you're aware of that meeting.
I am.
Okay, and the topic, the subject of discussion was improving the healthcare and what the states need to do. I don't know, I want to imagine that it's also out of concern for some of the things that you have asked, and also how it is that they can carry the states along that meeting has been held. Are you confident that after that, because a number of states are owing their resident doctors, some we understand as much as 20 months, and if you solve what is happening at the federal government, how will it, you know, affect the states where it would seem that you have majority of your members? Any conversations along that line?
I spoke with the Commissioner of the Cross River State, Dr. Betty, and you'll be surprised to know that even the Minister of Health was not in that meeting. When all commissioners of health in the country are coming down to discuss the affairs of the health sector.
The Minister of State for Health was there,
The Minister of Health, Dr. Saigi Haneri,
I know, but the Minister
was not there. Has he ever been in any of our meetings? I get emotional when you know there's a problem in the health sector. And those in charge are giving you stories or are not taking responsibilities for what is happening to the health sector. There's a decay, and the decay is deep. And it's quite unfortunate that people are paying with their lives.
No, I do not know. So I'm not making any excuses for the Minister of Health. We do not know why the Minister of Health wasn't there at that particular meeting. But as I did mention, the Minister of State for Health was there. I want to imagine that, you know, they're working together as a team in that particular ministry. But just to also mention to our viewers that the Minister of Labour was contacted when we were doing this program, and we're still hoping that somewhere along the line he'll be willing to give us the federal government side and also let us know just how far the federal government has gone in resolving some of the issues raised by the National Association of Resident Doctors, and also to bring this strike to an end. But, you know, as I was saying, that the Minister of Health wasn't there. We don't know whether he had challenges. We don't know what challenges he had, and you know, it might be very difficult to judge him based on the fact that he was absent from that meeting. But when you think of the fact that the Minister of State for Health was there, don't you think that that, you know, shows some seriousness on their own part?
I actually disagree, man. It's 151 days. We have met, we have been on strike, we have had several meetings. And I can tell you, man, of all the meetings we have had, it's just twice, which he barely stayed. It gives you an excuse.
That's the Minister of Health?
Yes. It tells you and gives you an excuse that I have the presidential and into the briefing and leaves. And the health system is burning.
You think he's hamstrung? Do you think that there's very little he can do? Maybe it's out of his powers.
It's the willingness to work. The willingness to prevent the health system from going down. The willingness to prevent the JOHESU, the MDCAN, NMA from going on a strike on the 18th. How do you make the system work? Years back, virtually people come down to Nigeria to seek good health care in the 50s.
The decay did not happen overnight. Indeed. I mean, we know that there was a time when we used to have people coming to Nigeria for health care. We were a health destination of choice. But the decay that we're witnessing today did not happen overnight. We had on tape the Minister of the SGF during COVID-19 visiting hospitals and saying that they didn't know that the decay was this bad. And it didn't happen overnight. And it will not be corrected overnight. However, the fact that you're on strike is not going to resolve this overnight as well. So, again, because you have given me two different minimum requirements now. The first is that, you know, your members who are on Give Me platform must be paid first. That's the minimum you were saying. The second is that you want the Minister of Labour to go.
And health. You should add health to it.
Which one of them is which?
Both of them are not doing their jobs.
No, what I mean is, which one of them is really the minimum requirement?
We had an MOA. Of the MOA, we had 12 things there. We brought it down to 5. I'll break it down. The members on GiveMix platform and locum doctors that are casualized, we said, capture them into the IP system, give a waiver, which they said they have given over 2 weeks ago, and they're not still being captured. Pay them what they have worked for.
Just quickly chip in that, you know, the most likely of the two which you have put forward is the fact that your GiveMix members might be paid. The members on GiveMix platform. Would that be sufficient enough for you to come back to work?
You must add the second one you said.
I didn't say it.
I said it.
Yes.
That the 2 of them that are not doing their job should leave their office. We insist, we are deciding to start a peaceful protest from next week, where all doctors in Nigeria are going to wear a black work coat, and we'll move around all hospitals for at least 2 hours to show that we mean business. We don't untwist people. We want to go back to work. Some people are preventing the good things we have done.
This is despite your meeting with the Vice President.
The Vice President is our only hope. But unfortunately, we met with him on Friday. On Saturday, we are getting the wrong information from the Minister of Labour. That's personal.
Okay, let's quickly flip this to my colleague in Lagos now, Coyote.
Well, thank you, Mark. But I just want to also clear, because it's important to find solutions to this. When we talk about the minimum requirements you need to resume this strike, that's what a lot of people want to hear. I mean, and then they can now say, government, they have laid their cards on the table. What's your next move? So you mentioned payment of members 114 on gift mix. You talked about the medical residency training funds. You also, I didn't hear you talk about that case in court. And the whole victimization that you have referenced time to time. And I just want to also clear this. So these issues of payment of members of gift mix, the medical residency training funds, I mean, these are essentially, they sound like budgeting issues, payroll issues, things that essentially will be at the Ministry of Finance or Budget and National Planning. So are they still really at the hands of the Minister of Health and Labor, especially these particular issues that you raised?
In any system that to work, there must be a planning. Rather in the health sector generally, there's a planning department in the Ministry of Health, giving a roadmap of how things are going to be achieved. On these payments, we have been promised and been addressed by the DG budget. The Minister of Finance was involved. They told us that the funds were available and it was going to be sent to the Attorney General's office. It was said on air by the Minister of Labour that we are going to recover what was looted by residents. I feel that is a misnomer. The list sent by the Postgraduate College, National Postgraduate College, to the IPs and to the Ministry of Health was also verified by them. They had no idea that they made wrong payments based on that list. We wrote since December and January to the Ministry of Health, the Attorney General's office, the IP's office, informing them that some people were paid in error, that we needed an account number where those monies will be paid back. Members are paying back. We actually also told them about 9 months ago that some may need to pay in bits, that if it can be deducted from the IPs, shows that we have integrity and want to do the right things. So it would be wrong to say on air that looted money for residency training when you did not even go through residency. Some people benefited then from the health sector when they were giving scholarship, which is one the Minister of Labour benefited from. He actually said twice on channels. We don't benefit from that. For an average resident to go do residency training to become a consultant takes an average of 6 to 8 years, depending on your specialty. And those in family medicine have about 7 updates and tend to pay up to virtually $1 million or 1.5 million naira every year. And you come on air and tell us that we're giving 540,000 to buy books. Stop feeding wrong information. You know, 114 of our house officers are still being owed. They should be paid. The members on GiveMix platform and the locum that are casualized should be captured and be paid. The medical residency training fund should be paid to our members for those 2020 and 2021. And the removal of the Minister of Health and Minister of Labour, then we'll call off the strike.
You know, it sounds a little more tricky, because if those are the additional or new conditions, you know, with which you have to call off the strike, many just thought, well, because when they hear you say that the VP is your only hope, so why is it that you don't think that the VP can, if you feel the other ministers are not conveying the right message, can the VP then convey that message, you know, rather than you asking for these ministers to be sacked? Because, I mean, if those ministers themselves hear this, and of course they will be angry, so who knows if that may throw spanner in the works of further negotiations, because this appears to be a system thing. not just about those two ministries or ministers?
Thank you. It's more like an ego thing now. If the Minister of Labour heard that we had a meeting with the Vice President and he's already intervening, why go back to the presidency the next day to give a wrong impression that we are insisting that you put no work, no pay on paper? Those that did not do their job, what penalty have been melted on them? It's the big question we have been asking for over 151 days. Some people are not doing their jobs. Nigerians are dying because of the decay they have brought into the system. Malpe said that it has been a consistent thing. But it's same people that have been in the same pipes.
I thought the decay did not happen overnight.
Yes, I know.
I said, yeah.
And it's same people. The Minister of Labour have been there since 1991.
As Minister of Labour?
Yeah, he worked in the ministry. The documents we signed about the hazard allowance was written and compiled by him. He was part of those that negotiated the hazard allowance of 1991. And up till now, we're still scrambling on how to improve on the hazard allowance. 1991. Was he not there then?
Well, this is where we are today, that you are on strike 37 days into the strike. And I'm sure a lot of Nigerians are anxious for this strike to come to an end. Yes, when you go on strike, what you want is for Nigerians to cry out, put pressure on government, and, you know, for government to accede to your demands as well. But that hasn't worked so far. So I'm wondering what other, because people are saying, you know, the use of strike doesn't punish government. It punishes the people who haven't offended the NARD. So how do you think that you can use this in such a way that the people who are most affected by the strike action which you have embarked upon do not feel it as painfully as they're feeling it?
Thank you, Malcolm. If we get strong commitment, I can put myself on the line. If I get strong commitment from the Vice President of the Federation, and I see that we can be able to take it and sell it back to the National Executive Council, we'll do by all means find a way to call off the strike. Because it's a trust thing. It's not personal. If we have somebody that has integrity and we can trust, not the ones we have discussed with earlier.
So you believe that the Vice President has the integrity?
He has integrity, he has trust, and somebody I believe can make things work.
Well, it's a fine place to leave it. Let us hope that your hopes will not be in vain, and that of Nigerians as well, and that this will be resolved even faster than, you know, we thought it was going to be, you know, resolved. But we have to thank you once again for sharing your thoughts with us this morning. Dr. Uyilawa Okwayesuye is the President, Nigerian Association of Resident Doctors. Just to also mention that we did try to get the Ministries of Health and Labor, and they're yet to join us as we speak, but we hope that in the coming days or thereabout, they should be with us on the program to give their own side of the conversation. But that's it for the segment. I hand you over now to Chamberlain Osa.
Well, yes, indeed. Thank you, Mark. We'll keep trying and hoping that we could get their perspectives, both ministries, into all of this. But in the meantime, we do have Dr. Rosemary Danesi. She's a labor lawyer, and she's well-versed at this matter. She's also a senior lecturer in the Department of Employment Relations and Human Resource Management, University of Lagos. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on the program today.
Good morning, Chamberlain. Good to be here.
Thank you. Well, having heard from the resident doctors, the minister, and probably what you might have read and kept tabs on this protracted doctor strike, and wow, because today many actually thought, okay, who knows, maybe the doctors may shift grounds, having heard the Minister of Labour speak, but alas, the doctors have now said, well, actually, the two ministers have got to go, then we call off the strike. How difficult can this be?
It's really a very difficult situation. In fact, that the government allowed the strike to go on for this long, it's beats my imagination, because we are talking about doctors here who save lives. This is an essential, they are providing essential services. Government shouldn't have allowed this strike to drag on for this long. When you bargain in good faith. From what we have heard from both sides and from what we have read, we have seen that there was actually an agreement between the two parties. And part of the reason why the doctors went on strike is because the other party, which is the government, reneged on that agreement. In normal industrial relations parlance, when you negotiate, you are expected to negotiate in good faith, and both sides are supposed to keep to their agreement. When you make an agreement, when you sign an agreement, you are committed to that agreement, and you ought to ensure that you fulfill whatever you have in that agreement, because failure to do that results in the kind of situation we have found ourselves now.
Well, what would you recommend at this point? Because it's not the first time that we hear of doctors or people going on strike in this country, and this it has a history, a huge history. And so what kind of methods for industrial relations can we adopt here? Because remember, this matter was even also I think some sort of arbitration, industrial courts. It also got to that level, yet there's no end in sight.
Yeah, well, before I go to the recommendations, we should look at the situation as it is currently. We've talked about what led to where we are, and as you said, this is not the first time that doctors are going on strike. That is why it shouldn't have lasted for 37 days or so, I hear. Now, the minister was talking about they ought not to go on strike. The law does not allow them to go on strike because they provide essential services. Fine. Essential services are not supposed to go on strike because of the disruption it will cause, especially when you talk about medical doctors, you are talking about lives. People are going to lose their lives, people are going to die. But then, strike is a legitimate weapon, and it is an essential element in the principle of collective bargaining, as affirmed by Lord Wedderburn as far back as 1942. So it's even ILO, though you don't have a convention that actually says, oh, there should be a right to strike. But when you look at the Committee of Experts and the Freedom of Association Committee, they sort of affirm that there's a right to strike. Because if you remove that right to strike from workers, then, it looks, you are removing power from them. How else can they show that they don't agree with what is going on? Or how else can they say, okay, the terms and conditions of service, are not what we want them to be, we want it to be improved. So the right to strike is there. In some constitutions, like South African Constitution, it is enshrined that there should be a right to strike, even in some European countries. In Nigeria, it's not that strike is outrightly banned. It's only in essential services as we are seeing it now. But then, if you don't want people in essential services to go on strike, then you should make special provisions for them, because you are curbing that right that essentially they ought to have as workers. Now, you don't want them to go on strike because you don't want a situation where there will be disruption to public service, or in this case, people will die and lose their lives. Then you should make sure that you have a conciliation or an arbitration process that's impartial and that will be fast and effective, to ensure that if there's any area of disagreement at all, it is resolved very fast in such a way that we won't have the kind of situation we have on our hands. So both parties, sticking to their own extreme positions will not help in this matter. Now we are seeing the resident doctors asking that the Minister of Health should be removed, the Minister of Labor should be removed. But thank God they have confidence in the Vice President. Removal of these people may look like it's extreme, but I think one can understand where the resident doctors are coming from. The way we can resolve this matter now is that government should try very hard. I remember Mokwe was talking about the fact that it may not be in the hands of the ministers of labor and health. Since it has to do with finance, it may be in the hands of the finance minister. It doesn't matter. These people should be working hand in hand. If you are owing these people some allowances or some salaries, please pay them. People are dying. We know that a lot of our politicians do not use our Nigerian hospitals. Maybe that is why it is possible for the resident doctors to be on strike for 37 days and nobody cares. It appears that it doesn't matter. The minister is saying, okay, no work, no pay rule, section 42 of the Trade Dispute Act will be enforced. And yet, that has not scared the doctors. They are still on strike. Because even before you say no work, no pay, you were not even paying them before. That's part of the reasons why they went on strike in the first place. He who is down fears no fall. So they are not even moved by the fact that you say, oh, if they don't go to work, you won't pay them, because they were actually on strike because of that in the first place.
Well, Dr.
Yes,
Danasi,
government has gone to the...
I imagine, pardon me, I imagine as an academic in the Nigerian context, you'll have rich case studies of, labor disputes. Just in 2 years with the resident doctors, we had 4 strikes. And I mean, that's just in the space of 2 years with just one association. Imagine with others, ASU, NASU, and all. So I imagine how much information you have at your behest. And it's good to actually glean from this, I mean, from the academic world, the kind of research you have done, the kind of information you have, such that government can learn from it. After all, that's why we have the academic sector. So what would have been a perfect scenario to deal with this? So imagine that ASU says, we're going on strike next week. What would you have expected to happen to follow up? You said this is not fast enough. So how would you have expected government and, stakeholders to handle this?
That's what I said that earlier on when I talked about bargaining in good faith and keeping to agreements. If I am a member of ASU, for instance, and over the years, I started teaching in 2002, and in fact, that's like a year after that, or about 6 months after I joined University of Lagos, there was this ASU strike during the time of President Obasanjo. So we have many cases of strikes, in Nigeria, even of the same unions going on strike time and time again. Like ASU, I mean, we've lost count of how many times we've gone on strike, and that has not really changed anything. And what is actually the reasons why people, public servants in Nigeria go on strike? I mean, unions go on strike in Nigeria. It is because agreements are not implemented. Agreements are not honored, especially by the federal government. If they can honor the agreements they willingly went into without being coerced in any form at all, then why don't they honor those agreements? Because if they do, then we won't have all these cases on our hands. And that has to be the starting point. Honor the agreements. Even when you go to the NIC and say you want to force the medical doctors to go back to strike, the NIC said, okay, you guys should go back to the negotiating table. Because at the end of the day, even when you talk about strike, no matter how long that strike is for, you will still end up at the negotiating table. So it's very important for government to keep to their agreements they've signed willingly with workers. If they do that, then we won't have workers going on strike all the time, and it's not good for Nigeria.
So you believe that government is solely responsible for this over 1 month long strike?
Well, from what I have seen so far, the government is telling us that they've made some concessions, they've done this, they've done that. But we listened to Dr. Uyilawa this morning, and he told us that they are owing salaries to house officers and some other people. You know, so it's like the government has not really done enough. And he said that if those people, workers are paid, that they are ready to go back to work. The one I may not readily agree to is that they have to remove the ministers of health and labor before they can go back to work. But then one can understand that they are not happy with the way those two personnel have handled the matter so far. And I believe also that they should have handled it in a better way, such that at the end of the day, it becomes a win-win situation. You know, nobody really gets how do I put it now? Nobody gets to a point where we will now get all the blame. Like a lot of people think that the government is majorly at fault. We are not saying that the resident doctors are completely they don't have some issues, you know, but majorly when things boil down to financial issues, you know, then I mean the doctors are working for the government. They are not supposed to pay themselves. The government is supposed to pay them for their work. A laborer deserves his or her wages. So when you work, you are expected to be paid. And in the event that you are not paid, you are supposed to show your displeasure. Only that in this particular instance, we are talking about workers in essential services. By going on strike, there's a lot of disruption. People are dying. So the resident doctors are supposed to take that into cognizance, that look, the Nigerian people are losing their lives. A lot of people cannot afford to go to private hospitals to get treatment. So,
what you're saying,
most people,
you talk about not having enough good faith when negotiations happen, because that is essential, having heard the rhetoric coming from almost all the parties. So now that they say that the VP is their only hope, can there be any guarantee that yes, if the VP is the only window, these matters will be resolved? Because VP doesn't have the final say, with due respect to him, because it still has to go to certain authorities who have the final say, who perhaps are still or will still be in position, even though the VP is the final say. So what's the guarantee that that will be addressed?
You know, from what the Dr. Ilawa said, and from what I can read by just while he was talking, I can see that they have confidence in the vice president. That confidence alone, you know, it's a big deal, because Once you have confidence that the person you are negotiating with is going to, at the end of the day, do something to ensure that all what you think were wrong will now be righted, so to speak, then that is the first stage to getting a settlement. Yeah, I was going to say, before I knew that the vice president had intervened, I had been advocating that at this stage where we had come to a situation where both parties could no longer settle the matter, even though the NIC had intervened. I was thinking that at this stage, the president should intervene, because I remember during the electioneering campaign, he was saying that he was going to ensure that we put a stop to medical tourism and that the health sector will be revived and things like that. Now, since the vice president has come into the matter, I assume that the president is aware, and possibly he probably is the one who has asked the vice president to intervene in this matter. But even though the vice president has intervened and we know they are still talking, it still boils down to the fact that the federal government and the state government have to ensure that the agreements that they have had with these doctors are implemented. Once those agreements are implemented, the MOUs or whatever, the CB collective bargaining agreement, whatever nomenclature they give to it, they should honor those agreements. They should implement the agreement. If they do that, I'm sure the doctors will go back to work. Even if the president does not remove those two ministers as they have proposed.
Well, we'll just perhaps now that they've had that meeting with the VP, and then this health, I think they call it the Health Sector Reform Committee that has been set up by the president with the VP chairing it for a period of 6 months. Yeah. You never can tell. So maybe there will be light at the end of the tunnel. But we do thank you. Yeah, we thank you very much indeed for your perspective this morning, Dr. Rosemary Danesi.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Marpa?
Well, that's the matter we're considering just about now. We did see last week the papers awash with stories of the CJN summoning the six chief judges of 6 different states to Abuja. We understand that the meeting was supposed to have held yesterday and did hold, even though cameras were not able to catch anything. But it would seem that there have been some talk about what emanated from that. But that has been of very strong concern, as you can see, to the INEC chairman right there, talking about how conflicting ex parte orders has made their work very difficult, reminding all stakeholders that their work at INEC is not just as umpire, but also as a regulator of what is happening within political parties. So what can the CJN do? We see this morning that there are reports of how 3 judges are now to face disciplinary action or are to show cause why disciplinary action should not be taken against them for the slew of conflicting orders which you have seen coming from courts in recent times. One of them, Rivers and Kebbi, case in point, with regards to the removal of the chairman of the PDP. We've also seen a case in point, that of APGA. Today they have a candidate, they don't have a candidate. You know, we've seen all manner of situations, even with regards to the PDP candidate in the forthcoming Anambra elections. That has now been cleared up. But these are some of the matters in which we have seen conflicting ex parte orders. To weigh in on the matter as to what is the expectation of not just lawyers, but also of stakeholders within the judiciary, and also, by extension, the stakeholder, the expectations of Nigerians. We have with us this morning Mr. Paul Harris Ogbole, who is a senior advocate of Nigeria. You're welcome to Sunrise Today this morning.
Thank you very much, Ms.
First, let me ask you, were you happy when you heard about the intervention of the Chief Justice of Nigeria into this issue, this very thorny issue of conflicting ex parte orders?
Thank you. I was quite very elated. I was happy that the CJN waded into the matter to bring sanity and, decorum to the judiciary.
Was it of grave concern to you?
Personally, yes, it was, and I figure most lawyers felt quite concerned because it affects the integrity of the judiciary, which can again negatively also affect the democratic process we have, because the judiciary, like we always say, is the last hope of the common man, and when there is, we're hearing discordant tones from the sanctuary, the judiciary. It leaves for confusion, and people are confounded. They don't know what is right or what is wrong. You're moving this way, you intend to abide by this order of court, then there's a conflicting order on the other side, and then you go back and forth. It's total anarchy. So what the CJN has done is to try to rein in the process and ensure that there's sanity and stability. He's empowered under the National Judicial Council Act, to call in discipline and set regulations concerning the administration of justice. The internal mechanism for cohesion and order within the judiciary. So he has exercised that power by calling in the heads of court, the respective courts, the states that are affected from where these orders came. He has called them first to hear from them, and the next step is a panel which will look into the records or proceedings of the court and all that happened, so that they also will have a fair hearing. A proper understanding of what transpired will be, will looked at, and then from there, and I think an appropriate decision will be taken by the CGN or the appropriate committee.
Well, we heard he wasn't alone at that meeting yesterday, that he was there with the President of the Court of Appeal and also the head of the High Court, and also the head of the Industrial Court, the meeting which was held yesterday. We're not privy to it, and there are no camera shots from it, but these are things that we heard. And we also heard that there was a strong grilling of the judges, the chief judges who were invited, because from what we understand, he believes that the chief judges should bear vicarious liability for what has happened in their state. Do you agree with him?
Well, first, most of the judges you mentioned are naturally members of the judicial the MJC. And much as we do not know what transpired, as it were, it is to be expected that just the same way, the citizenry and lawyers particularly feel peeved about the conflicting orders of court under the circumstances. I do expect that the CJN, of course, the first line of hierarchy is administrative hierarchy in the state is the chief judges of the respective states. So yes, it is appropriate that he calls and hears from them and demands an explanation what happened, first from them. And yes, it is expected also that as the heads of court, they are supposed to man their courts and maintain, the sanctity of the respective judiciaries in their states. So I think what he has done is quite in order.
So should they have done this by themselves? Because, some people will say if a judge in River State gave an ex parte order and another in Kebbi gave another one conflicting with what was given in Rivers, what powers will, say, the chief judge in River State have over, say, a matter in Kebbi, for instance?
No, the chief judge of a particular state, his powers are first of all to assign the cases. He will assign the cases, and then the judge to whom the case is assigned will he's the arbiter in that particular case. So ideally, he would answer himself.
Do ex parte orders go through the chief judges? Are they assigned as well?
In most cases, they come to to the chief judge. But if they are in divisions where there is a sole judge, if there's a division maybe on the outskirts, and that division, the matter comes up before that division, the judge can hear it without it having to go to the CJ. And then again, you have instances where there are vacation courts. There's a vacation judge. Because of the nature of urgency of these ex parte orders, it doesn't necessarily have to go through, maybe wait until maybe the regular courts resume and what have you. No, it can go straight to the vacation judge.
The point I'm trying to make is, do the chief judges really bear vicarious liability for ex parte orders?
Not necessarily. I do not think so.
And what powers would they have been able to exercise if it's out of their jurisdiction, so to speak?
Well, first, they do not bear the vicarious liability of judgments or orders of judges within their jurisdiction. That, let's be clear on that. However, for administrative lapses, where there are administrative, because he's the chief administrative officer of the judiciary in his state, so there are certain powers, certain administrative powers that he will wield, apart from assigning cases, but if there are disciplinary matters, he could make recommendations. And then he can also, set a stage, create, he's the head there. So as a head, whatever is expected of him to do as a head, he has to do. But as far as the particular case for which a judge adjudicates is concerned, no, he doesn't bear liability for that.
No, what I'm saying is, what if it's out of his jurisdiction?
Now,
out of his state, for instance.
Now, what happens is, when you have an ex parte order in a particular case, for instance, one emanates in say, Anambra, and then another one emanates in Kebbi. Now, the judge, the lawyer or the applicants who prepare the applications before a judge oftentimes may not disclose what is going on or the other facts of a matter that are already before another court. Yes, maybe if it becomes public knowledge, it may be a notorious fact for which a court may take cognizance of. But in most cases, the applicants will not disclose to say, look, there is a similar application before another court. An order has been granted, adverse to us, therefore we are coming here. No, it doesn't happen. And the judge may not know. So when they are, and then the party on the other side, because it is ex parte and not on notice, he wouldn't also know that there's already an order against him. It is at the time the order is either served or published that he gets to know. So the judge in Kebbi may not know what is going on in Anambra. However, the question to be asked again is, why go to a right emanates from an action in a particular state? The parties are probably resident in that state. The course of action is in that state. The parties maybe do business in a particular state. There's what we call territorial jurisdiction. Now, when somebody leaves such a place and goes yet to another state to obtain an order, was still an ex parte order, it gives room for suspicion, for concern. Because not only do we say that justice must be done, we must also see justice, it must also be seen to be done. So when a case comes up under circumstances like that, it gives cause for worry and concern. So,
Mr. Ogbole, you haven't quite answered my question. The question I'm raising is that if something is out of the jurisdiction of a chief judge, I imagine that chief judges man a certain jurisdiction. Isn't that correct?
Very well, very well.
Now, if this matter is of a conflicting nature, but it is outside of their jurisdiction, say not around the area that they man, do they really have powers? What powers can they exercise in that regard?
I thought I already answered that. No. What powers do they have? It is outside their jurisdiction. No. They can only concern themselves with their own particular states. Okay. That is why the MJC at the national level now is calling them all in, where it will be resolved. In the respective states, no. You can't leave your jurisdiction. You can't leave your state and begin to make pronouncements about the judiciary of another state.
But could they have called themselves before now? For instance, say the chief judge of Rivers alerts the chief judge of Kebbi, just painting a scenario.
That could be at the personal level. It could be at the personal level. For instance, like I said, judges may not know. It depends on how much they follow the news. They may not know. But once it is reported, when cases are reported, when judgments are reported, then it is taken that yes, you would know. I mean, like reported in law reports. And oftentimes, Most of them are usually in the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court. So and they may not be immediately reported. So yes, they may not know.
Okay, let's quickly take the questions from my colleague in Lagos.
Well, thanks, Mark. I was going through some of the statements from the CJN at that meeting yesterday, and he was warning the CJs to henceforth avoid unnecessary assumption of jurisdiction in matters with similar subject and parties already before another court. In fact, he went on to advise all heads of courts to be current on the development in the polity and the judgments delivered by courts of various jurisdiction, and of course urgently issue practice direction to guide judges. And I know this has been, I mean, you've referenced this at least a few times during this conversation, but just to be clear, are you saying that judges, I mean, don't read the pages of newspapers? Because I mean, if the cases were brought to different courts the same day, it might be understandable, but one was taken to the Rivers courts one day, and a few days after, in fact, the news had broke on social media, online, on the pages of newspaper, before it was then taken to the other court. So does that imply that judges don't read pages of newspaper, they don't watch television, they just seclude themselves essentially from things happening in the polity? I hope you got me.
Judges read newspapers just like everyone else. They also follow the news. And there are some matters that are actually matters of notorious facts for which you could expect that people would know because, it's in the news and everybody talks about it and what have you. However, the responsibility of judges primarily is regards the matters that are specifically brought before them. The matters that are brought before them, they will first of all concern themselves with the matters, the applications that are before them. They are not likely to be influenced ordinarily by general sayings around the streets or what have you. They will first of all concern themselves with the matters that are before them. However, there are certain matters that are matters of notorious facts. Where there are notorious facts, it is also expected that judges, could take cognizance of such notorious facts in the administration of, in the course of administration of justice. So we need to know the applications that are filed before these respective judges. So unless we know the details of such applications, it may be difficult. Like I said earlier, in most cases, lawyers and applicants that file applications before judges, particularly ex parte applications, may not disclose entirely the facts, the full facts, before that court. It is possible that they will only disclose facts that could be favorable to them. But that does not in any way take away the fact that there are some matters that are notorious facts that are, if you like, public knowledge for which courts may take cognizance of. At any rate, where we are now is where the judges themselves will have to answer to these matters. So when they answer to them, then we'll take it from there. We'll know, because the NJC will still have to decide, having heard all parties. So I expect that in the days ahead, they will come up with their answers and to all of these issues, and then the NJC will take its appropriate decision.
Well, on a lighter note, it means the judges have got to watch a lot more of maybe Sunrise Daily and News at 10 to get themselves abreast with some of those issues. But, speaking seriously...
Well, perhaps...
yeah, I mean, they have to, because for what the CJN has said, I'm not sure that they want to be on the wrong side of the law. Speaking about the law, is there any rule or any such thing that bars lawyers from foreign shopping?
Well, in a way, yes, because one of the things that bars you is the fact that the rules of court provides for where a cause of action, where you can actually, the jurisdiction within which you can file your matter. For instance, the rules are clear in most of the high courts and, across the country and the Federal High Court, that the cause of action, where the cause of action arose, where the parties do business, or particularly the defendant does business, where the defendant resides. These three key elements are very, very important in determining where a matter is instituted. So there's what they call a territorial jurisdiction. So when a matter ordinarily emanates, or the parties there do business in a particular state, or the cause of action arose there, or they are resident there, and you take the matter from there to another jurisdiction, another state, that's a clear case of forum shopping. So yes, you would say that there are certain basic laws and principles that try to mitigate against forum shopping.
So in other words, if that kind of matter,
you may imagine a case like
go ahead.
Like the case of Ibori. In the case of Ibori versus the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Ibori was resident for the material time in Delta. The offenses for which he was being charged were in Delta. The parties concerned, the funds concerned were primarily those of Delta State. But his action was commenced in Kaduna State, even though at the Federal High Court. But he went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court had to send the case back to Delta State for where the matter was again re-litigated. So yes, there are instances where people, even for political cases, more so for political cases, like the situation we have at hand right now, where you have conflicting cases from the respective, you see some coming up in one state, another coming up in another state, and what have you. But the rules are very clear, where you can actually, commence these actions, and the courts that ordinarily should have jurisdiction over this matter. So that's why you see the president of the Nigerian Bar Association, calling out and saying, look, what's going on? And the CGN is also saying, look, we need to wield the appropriate sanctions in appropriate cases.
So does that mean that
at the moment,
what we expect to see moving forward is that if certain cases of this kind of political cases come before the judge, they shouldn't hear it?
Well, the CJs of respective states, are empowered to come up with practice directions. And that's like the guiding rules operational in a particular state in the High Court. So moving forward, it could be expected that the practice directions would be more stringent and would be more clearly stated, so that it restricts your ability to take matters outside of the appropriate jurisdictions.
Would it be right for us to then assume that perhaps all those questions about technicalities, will be history?
Well, technicalities, you can't totally rule out technicalities in the practice of law and adjudication. But it is where technicality takes the day at the expense of justice that is a matter of major concern to the citizenry.
All right. Okay, just follow up to some of the points you made earlier. So 3 judges essentially meant to show reason why disciplinary action should not be taken based on some of the cases we have seen, those ex parte orders across the states. But do you think that perhaps we should have another solution, perhaps another layer of solution aside that one? Because this will also seem like a system issue. If maybe there was some sort of, I don't know, the database or some system where you have real-time information on, the cases that are, that particular case, perhaps it's in another court of coordinate jurisdiction. I believe you get what I'm saying. So do you think there should be another layer of solution such that it's not just focused on the judges who perhaps are saying, maybe this is a systemic problem. I can't be everywhere. I'm not omniscient or that. So do you think there should be another layer of solution?
Well, that is part of the evolution that, and the improvements we hope to see in the course of time in the administration of justice. Using technology, like you said, information can be made more available, maybe at direct dedicated portals to judges and to particular jurisdictions, across the states, so that you do not necessarily have to wait for a case to be reported either in the news media or in the law reports, which may take some time to come up before judges become aware. And again, practice directions moving forward, in trying to cure this challenge that we have, can be targeted at actually streamlining issues of jurisdiction, not negating the fact of jurisdiction as provided for in the acts. So we can streamline that so that it reduces or narrows, it pinpoints where you can specifically, file applications, and the sanctions also can also be improved upon. Now, the NJC is the body that appropriately looks into matters like this. That's why it is set up. And clearly the judiciary has its own internal mechanism, internal cleansing mechanism. So whatever the challenges are that we see, I trust that the judiciary, the NJC and the CJN, you would very clearly, using the instrumentality of the NJC, appropriately address the matter to bring sanity to bear, so that moving forward, the confidence in the judiciary will further be strengthened.
I want to
So I
ask
wonder
you about the body of benches, which a number of lawyers also belong to. Do you think that they have a role in this? Because it is not the judges who bring matters to themselves. It is lawyers who go forum shopping. Do you think that the body of benches can call lawyers to order?
Well, yes, I think so, but more appropriately, the MBA. Now, you have the MBA, you have the body of benches. The body of benches is more concerned with the legal education, the legal training, and, the call to bar, and the entire profession, as it were. But the MBA concerns itself with the practitioner. We all subscribe to it, and we have our own rules there. Now, don't forget, there's also the Legal Practitioners Disciplinary Committee that also takes care of disciplinary matters amongst lawyers. So these institutions do exist. So working hand in hand, and the synergy between all parties, if they apply them properly, I believe that...
Do you think it should intervene in this matter? Do you think it should, because the NJC is already on it, it should be left to the NJC?
Well, the NJC is more concerned with the judges. The MBA, the President Oluwapata, has already come up on the matter, and he has already called out, and from what I understand, he's already taken certain steps concerning that. The lawyers who are particularly involved, I'm sure there are some discussions around them. So the details, I think, the President will himself say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Some judges, I must beg your pardon, some lawyers were a little, even though they were elated like you, they expressed mixed feelings. I mean, on one hand, they were elated. On the other hand, they also think that this could provide an inroad for an abuse of power if it's not checked. Because the point that they make is that this should not be construed as an opportunity to intervene or weigh in on the autonomy that judges wield when it comes to the judgments that they have given. And they fear that, in future somebody could cite this example as some instance whereby a chief judge exercised powers that, I don't know, they didn't have, perhaps, I don't know. But do you see any fear, do you exercise any fear whatsoever rising from this case that these powers could be expanded in future to, to areas that were unprecedented in the very first instance?
I don't think so.
I hope you understand my question.
I understand you very well. I don't think so. Reason being that, one, first of all, ex parte orders or interim injunctions, as they are not total. They are not illegal. They are provided for by our rules, and they are supposed to be exercised judiciously and judicially for the purpose of administration of justice. Now, what the CJN is doing, he's empowered to do it by the NJC Act, and all judges themselves are also bound by that act. Their conduct is also bound. It must be in tandem with the act. Now, what the CJN is doing is not targeting any particular judge for a decision he took. He's looking at the totality of the institution. There are conflicted judgments here and there and there. And he has set up a machinery to look into it, to find out. It's still a find, because he has not taken any particular decision, to the best of my understanding. So unless a finding comes out, you cannot say that, he wielded his stick. And besides, that does not stop them from, they all have their rights. even as a judge. So the fact that a matter is being investigated by the NJC does not affect the independence of the judge. It doesn't. Because if you are ordinarily, if you are challenging the action of a judge, you probably will be going on appeal. But in this particular instance, you have a multiplicity of diverse actions and decisions of courts. And you would not expect in good conscience that the CJN will sit and watch the entire institution. All over now, people look at the judiciary and people are wondering, what's really going on? You know.
So as a result of this action now, what outcomes are you expecting, and what significance do you think they will hold for the judiciary going forward, especially as we go into the political cycle?
Well, I expect sanitization. I expect that the process that has commenced will lead to greater sanity within the judiciary.
By sanitization, what do you mean?
I mean a cleaning process whereby judges are conscious of matters that are brought before them, so that they are not unduly led wrongly by lawyers who bring matters before them. Oftentimes, like I said, lawyers bring matters before judges, and the judges do not know the facts of the matter other than what is presented before them in court. So by the time the CJN is done with this process, we expect, if there are mistakes, there are corrections to those mistakes. If there are things to be learned, people will learn. And there will be improvement in the overall system, whereby, justice is actually served to all concerned.
Well, I imagine that is the expectation of many Nigerians as well. We have to thank you so much for coming on Sunrise Daily this morning. Mr. Paul Harris Ogbole,
that's right,
is a senior advocate of Nigeria. Thank you for coming on
Thank
the
you very much,
program this morning. Well, we're not going to finish without taking your mails. We have a few of them. Let's look at this one from Mufutao Adewale, talking about conflicting court orders. It says, conflicting orders by 6 high courts is absolutely ridiculous. It gives the common man low confidence in court orders and tarnishes the image of the judiciary. The negligent must be punished to avoid future occurrence.
Well, Aminu Abba Ali says, with the advent of technology, I suggest the NJC develop a portal warehousing database where all filed court cases will be uploaded as they are received, so that judges from all parts of the country can log on to view before entertaining fresh cases, to avoid duplication of cases being filed in another court nationwide. It's doable, and I believe can bring sanity and uphold the integrity of our judiciary. Well,
Festus Akiboyewa sends us a mail on the FG NARD face-off saying the tango between the two is uncalled for, especially when innocent Nigerians, patients, are the ones bearing the brunt.
Well, Henry says, talking about the NARD strike now, says the only hope is in President Muhammadu Buhari. Let us appeal to Mr. President to intervene directly on this matter and make pronouncements. This is an emergency.
Polycarp says the NARD president, in my view, is too political. He should tone down his personal attacks on the officials of government.
Well, take a look at famous Timile's mail, still on strike. It's a legitimate right of the resident doctors to strike and not a privilege. Parties should respect their agreement in the first instance.
And Kenneth Abiuro says, my appeal to all stakeholders in the health sector is this. While you're exercising powers or rights, please be humane. The deadlock between the striking doctors and the federal government is causing the deaths of many innocent citizens of the country.
And this one from Professor Nakena says the federal government must realize that healthcare sector is not only an important sector, it is also an indisputable and indispensable critical sector. Well, let those words sink in, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm sure the words have sunk in. That's the show for today, everyone. Thank you for
Personally,
watching.
I think the VP who has intervened on this matter has also been appointed by the president as also I think the chairman of the Health Sector Reform Committee. So we look forward to see what will come of that, whether there will be an overhaul of the healthcare sector, but trust that we'll certainly keep tabs on it for you, any development in that particular sector. Thank you so much for watching this morning. I'm Maokwe Ogun Yusuf.
I'm Kayode Okikiolu.
So guess we'll be hearing from the VP sooner rather than later then. I'm Chamberlain, so goodbye.